Welcome to World Chefs Podcast. I'm your host, Ragnar Fredriksson, and you're listening to World on a Plate. Today, I'm talking to Kirk Bachman. He is the president and provost of the Auguste Escoffier School of Culinary Arts in Boulder, Colorado. So Kirk has an extremely rich and fascinating career, and as a chef, as an educator, he's won many accolades. And I should mention, he is a World Chef certified global executive chef. Congratulations, Kirk. And he's
Yay.
CF certified executive chef, member of the American Academy of Chefs, awarded Educator of the Year by the Food Educators Network International. And then I should mention, Kirk also serves as a host for the Escoffier School's podcast called The Ultimate Dish, which I highly recommend. And we will add the link to this podcast, so you will find it if you want to check it out. But hey, with no further ado, Kirk, welcome on the show.
Thank you so much, Chef. It's great to be here. It's chilly. It's 9:30 in the morning in Boulder, Colorado. It is the beginning of winter. Winter is coming, as they say. I'm looking at the mountains to my left there, and I know that it's almost dinner time in Paris. So thank you you for staying up for me.
No worries. No. So yeah, it's almost like it's become like a good habit for us to catch up, because I was on your podcast the other day and we had a great discussion, and so I'm so happy to not render the favor, but to have you also share your experience with our audience, and because I know that you've been involved in culinary education for a long time now, and I just want to take the pulse with you on the culinary education today and how it's changed and how we need to adapt for in the future. But hey, before we start and get into all that, all that serious thing, why don't you tell us more about your own journey, how you became a chef, and what path you've taken?
Yeah, absolutely. Appreciate that. And interestingly enough, and almost ironically, this past Saturday was the 177th celebration of the birth of Auguste Escoffier. So, and in an almost surreal way, that's also the day that we celebrate my father's birthday. And I had the good fortune of having a little phone call with Michel Escoffier on Saturdays, the great grandson, and my father was sitting next to me, so we exchanged, happy birthday celebratory comments. It was really special. My dad turned 87, and it kind of starts there for me. My mom and dad came over, like many immigrants, to the United States in the 60s from Germany. But the story goes a little further back. My father's father, my grandfather, was also a baker, and his father before him was a baker in Germany. And I would say that my dad's side is Bohemian. After many different wars, right? The borders always change, but where my father, worked and played and all of that was in Bavaria. After the war, of course, a lot of things changed. A lot of people were removed from their homes and their businesses, and my father lost his father, my grandfather, in the war, and they landed on a farm in Bavaria, taken in by a farming family, and it's another reason why the connection between farmers and chefs is so very important to me. My mother's from northern Germany, and so by the time my father was 16, even though they no longer had their bakery, he was encouraged to go into the industry. So he started a very formal track, like many Europeans and apprentices before him, by making a 6-year journeymanship, a 3-year apprenticeship. He earned his Meisterbrief in Dusseldorf in 1958. That's where he met my mom. But my dad's goal always was to come to America. Now in Germany, in order to open a bakery, to own a bakery, then and today, you have to achieve this level of Meisterbrief, right? A master of your craft. But my dad was 26 at the time. He wanted to come to America, so that's what he did. He came over with other friends and landed in Chicago. And, did what many immigrants did, worked really, 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 really hard. They call it that silent generation, right? There was no technology to distract you and such. It was really all about work. And so we were in Chicago early on, and then we moved back to Germany. That's when I kind of came along, and German was my first language, my first sort of understanding of the world, I guess. And then sure enough, we came back to Chicago again, and in the 70s, together with other friends and relatives from Germany, we all sort of moved to Colorado and got into the hotel business. And so I always joke that I did everything I could not to be in this business. Like when you grow up in your father's bakery,
Like
and
anything else but that.
yeah, going to school, there was no, natural, peanut butter and jelly sandwiches and, Hunt's Snack Pack or any of those convenience foods that became popular in the 70s. For me, it was, homemade rye bread with liverwurst and Black Forest torte for dessert and things like that. I couldn't appreciate those beautiful subtleties at that time in my life because I was different than everyone else, right? I didn't have a bag of potato chips, but boy, do I appreciate it now, and I'm so thankful for that now. So, long story short, got into the hotel business. My parents are still alive. My dad's 87. Celebrated that birthday on Saturday. My mom's 80, and they live about 2 or 3, 4 or 5 hours from here. My sister's another couple of hours from here in Boulder. And when it came time to go to school, my parents both were very, very adamant that I went to a traditional university because they didn't have that opportunity. So I did that. And like I said, I was trying to do everything I possibly could. What I really wanted to do in life is I wanted to be an interpreter, a German interpreter at the UN.
Yeah.
That's what I wanted to do. But, if it's in your DNA, Chef, if it calls, eventually it calls. And so after I studied at the university, I ended up going to culinary school and, went into the family business and did what many people do, work for, Westin and Hyatt and Hilton and so on and so forth. And then I found education. Gosh, almost 30 years ago. And just like you, just love to kind of give back to an industry that's been so good to me. Long answer for a quick question. Apologize.
No, absolutely, and very revealing. So I mean, you say you did all the big hotels, and you were a successful chef. You were mentioned as who is who among rising young Americans, and so education is like transmitting knowledge. That you really found your vocation, and that how important is that to you?
Yeah, boy, there's so many things that I could say about that, and it's changed a lot, right? And I'm sure we'll get into this ability that we have to reach people through the internet, online. But it used to be, even when I went to culinary school, even when I went to the university, you went there because that's where knowledge was kept. We didn't have these tools, right? We didn't have this Zoom session like we have right now. Yeah. You studied books. I still have my original. It's beat up, but my original copy of Legee. That's where you found knowledge, and in the classrooms and in the kitchens of culinary schools, because the knowledge was underneath the toque. That's just what you had to do. But what I've seen, if you would have asked me 20 years ago, do you think that we will be able to teach students how to cook using online means? I probably wouldn't even have understood the question, right? Yeah. Because so think about it, you go to culinary school 20, 30 years ago, and there was a certain way that the chefs, the instructors taught you because it was the way they were taught, right? And it was the industry standard. This is the way we season. This is the way we prep. This is the way we present, so on and so forth. And today, fast forward, And I could talk more about Escoffier as well if you'd like. But
Mm.
today, I think when I visit with my chef instructors, both here in Boulder and online, I don't ask them to carry that weight anymore. I ask them to, more than anything, be facilitators of knowledge.
Mm.
Just share in the knowledge. When we're talking about different cuisines, imagine a world where there is someone in your classroom that happens to be from, from Georgia, or from, from Germany, or from France, and they have special stories of how they grew up and how they ate. 20, 30 years ago, we may not have had, that student may not have had a voice in that classroom, but today they do.
Right.
Let's all talk about this together, and let's learn together. Be a facilitator of knowledge. That's all I ask. So, boy, we could have a whole podcast just on education alone.
Yeah,
if we
no,
wanted.
definitely. Yeah, and no, it's fascinating. And I mean, so I mean, I know you take it to heart, and you were again, you were named Educator of the Year. I mentioned earlier through the on the Food Educators Network. And is that what, like is it different to be a chef in a brigade and an educator? Is the approach very different? What makes a great educator in your opinion?
Oh gosh, that's such a great question. And when I think about um, there was an amazing chef. He was the chef of the Greenbrier for years. His name was Peter Timmins, Irish. We lost him way too soon. Irish gentleman and chef, and a total gentleman chef, if you will. um, he used to tell me that he liked to work alongside those in his brigade, right? So in other words, when it got really busy and the line was overwhelmed, in the weeds, as they say, Peter would jump on the line and ask those around him, cooks, what can I do? What can I do to help, rather than barking orders and that sort of thing, which was way before its time, right?
Yeah.
So the brigade is also a place of learning. It's just the way the learning takes place is a little different today than it was maybe in Lyon, 40 years ago with Paul Bocuse, right? It's a place where you're watching what's going on around you. You have mentors all around you. You have coworkers all around you that are helping you learn every step of the way. It's the same thing here. We rotate our chefs around, our chef instructors around to different classes so that they're also learning along with their students. I always say that, or I celebrate the fact that when you're learning, you're the best teacher you can possibly be.
Mm.
Because then your whole narrative is around that. I taught a class in Thai cuisine the other day, and then that's your vocabulary for those several weeks or months, because you're learning along with the students. So I think it's one and the same. And I'm talking, Chef, really about the way it is today. If you would have asked me that question 30 years ago, I think it could have been a little bit different answer, because as you know, probably the way you came up too, it used to be, this is the way it's done, and I'm going to show you how to do it once, and then you're going to do it that way. And I'm not reserving that just for our industry. It's probably like that in many vocations. If you're a plumber, this is the way we do it. If you're an HVAC technician, this is the way we do it. If you're stringing lines, along the highway, this is the way we do it, right?
Mm.
But yeah, very. I think today it's one and the same.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you talk a lot about, with the new generation, we talk about how, fewer people are coming into the industry, and we talk a lot about the Generation Z and sort of generational shift. So, like, even since you started teaching, have you seen, like, is a big change in how you need to communicate and engage with a 20-year-old today? We typically say, I call it Generation Z, or than
Yeah,
20 years ago with a millennial or a. Do you see that? Is there a difference in different ambience in the classroom, different approach?
yeah.
Hmm?
Not just in the classroom. We were talking a little bit before the show. When I think about my life, when I think about my family, when I think about my children, Mine is a unique situation. I spoke of my parents. They're from what's called the silent generation, right? It was all about hard work, loyalty, that sort of thing. There was no technology, right? So that's one generation or group, right? I'm a baby boomer. I was born in the 60s. So I also I think for me and many baby boomers, what was important was jobs stability, right? But we had to adapt to technology a little bit later in life, right? I would say probably in my 30s is when technology, smartphones and that sort of thing started to happen, and you had to adapt. Gen X, we hear a lot about. My wife is Gen X, and I think when you think about those individuals that were born in late 60s to the 80s, they started to really focus a little bit more on work-life balance, right? They had more opportunities. They had a little bit of technology. They embraced it perhaps a little easier because it was, just part of their life. Gen Y, millennials, my two older daughters are in that bucket, if you will. Very high-tech savvy. They embrace social media. They work and live on digital platforms. They have figured out how to prioritize life-work balance, personal growth, diversity. And then I look at my younger children, Gen Z, right? They're not necessarily in the workforce just yet, but many Gen Zs are, right? Again, diversity, social justice, individual expression, extremely tech dependent, not just savvy, but dependent, right? They grew up with smartphones, right? Here, go watch this and, stop talking type of stuff. And so to relate that to your question, Chef, I think I approach everything in a very, maybe too optimistic way. I'm very, very, positive. So you bring all of these unique personalities together. I think the pandemic was a challenging time for our industry, but some people left our industry, and then some people started to come back to our industry because of opportunities that opened up, right? And so you bring all of these generations together, and some are learning from others, some are more technology savvy than others, and they're helping those that are not along. So I see it here in the classrooms as well. At Escoffier, I think our student population sort of varies between, the recent high school grad all the way to adult learners who are changing their careers, right?
Right.
So the whole gamut. And education is for everyone, right? Yeah. We have to make this opportunity available for everybody. So I'm much more optimistic about what I've seen. Now, I'm also a realist, right? I speak with restaurateurs and restaurant owners, weekly, daily. They're part of our advisory board, and we have to. Escoffier has to support them as much as we possibly can. I don't believe that the workforce is 100% back to the same levels that it was, a short 5-6 years ago. But what I will say, Ragnar, when you look at our online population, that's definitely an older student, maybe 26 to 31. They've done some other things in life. The pandemic allowed them to pursue a dream that they never thought they would be able to pursue.
Right.
And that's, the culinary arts, because we made a commitment 10 years ago, 12 years ago, how can we become more flexible in presenting education? How can we adapt? And how can we help people realize their dreams without having to relocate, leave their families, change their lives, take on, all kinds of debt. So we were able to kind of go into their kitchens, if you will. That was super, super helpful. So this is a very unique group, this 26 to 31. They are committed to this industry because I've tried some other things. When you when you have our students in Austin, Texas, and here in Boulder, Colorado, and you come to in-person learning, much younger skew, recent high school graduate, 24 years of age or younger. And it's everything's new to them, right? Everything's, exploring. They're the reason I feel confident that this industry will continue to prosper, because I go into those kitchens this morning with my Halloween mask on, and I see the enthusiasm and the curiosity and the courage of people who want to be in this industry, and they want to give back, whether it's plant-based or pastry or culinary, front of the house, whatever it is. Again, not trying to be naive, but I believe in this group of learners. I really do.
Yeah. But has it, so you say it's needed some sort of, well, there has been adaptation or a change on the way to intake students and onboard new students and how to motivate them. And
yeah, in a larger sense, I would say this, I don't want this to sound like a marketing, pitch in any way, shape, or form, but, over the last decade and with the accreditors that supported us, it's all about from my vantage point anyway, it's all about evolving and acceptance, right? What we set out to do at Escoffier was to break down the barriers of education through technology, right? Our
Right.
Like I said earlier, our research indicated that there were three main barriers for people who wanted a culinary education, but they didn't actually try it. They didn't enroll. Location, schedule, and the cost.
Right.
So if you can take the cost out, which we did, through online means, if we created a schedule that was asynchronous so they could learn at their pace, and we didn't ask them to relocate or move, we found that the window of opportunity increased tenfold. It was imagine, and now with all that said, Chef, with all that said, there are still many people like myself. I'm a sort of kinesthetic learner. I need to be right here in person. That works for some people. Come to school 5 days a week, 5 hours a day, 5 to 6 hours a day. And the results have to be the same, though. The results have to be the same, supporting our industry 100%. Flexibility and the ability to meet, I guess I should say it this way, to meet people where they are, meet them where they are. And that's what we've been able to do.
Yeah. Hey, but I mean, you mentioned it just a little bit, going a little bit back. You mentioned earlier that your father, and I know that it's different in different countries. How we recognize skills, how we recognize a professional ability. With the German master chef, you have to have a license really to be able to do anything as feeding other people bread or cooking or pastry or what have you. And in other countries, this does not exist, and people can sort of just drop into the profession, and maybe their skills will never be recognized or so. You are both World Chef certified executive chef and with the ACF certified CEC. What does that mean to you? That professional recognition?
Yeah, I appreciate you bringing that up. And again, I guess I'll mention this, and I'll respond to this in a sort of a humble way, if I could. For me, it's more about the love of the craft. I was introduced to the American Culinary Federation at a young age. Keep in mind, my father was already a Meister, right? So for him, he understood this concept of learning from those that came before you. It was very important to him. And it was a rigorous process, right? When I discovered the American Culinary Federation, and it was a German chef in Denver that my dad introduced me to, and then started explaining it all to me. I'd already gone to the university. For me, it almost felt like an alumni association. It felt like a now this is how I can communicate. Again, keep in mind, our only communications back then were telephones and, maybe magazines that came out, right? So I would have to wait and wait and wait. Chef, I'm going to digress just a little bit. I have menus, framed menus all over my office. I have Marco P.R. White behind me. I've always appreciated and revered those who came before me and come before our students, right? I can remember Charlie Trotter, God rest his soul, an amazing human being, that opened Charlie Trotter's in Chicago years and years and years ago. The only way I could reach him was to call the restaurant and say, I have a small restaurant in Colorado. I saw your article in Food and Wine magazine, whatever it was, 1985. And, would you do me the honor of sending me a menu? And he did. He sent me a couple of menus. He signed them. I framed them. I put them up on the wall. So I had a story to tell. I had a story to tell to my guests, right? Really, really important. So for me, it was less about you receiving the medals for competition or the awards, or it was more about the people that I was meeting. When I was inducted into the American Academy of Chefs, at my table were Edward Leonard and Ferdinand Metz, right? So for me, again, that's nothing that I need to put on Instagram, but for me, those two gentlemen who I respected and still respect to this day and remain friends with, that was important to me, that they were there with me. And now if I can be a mentor and have been for others that are coming through, John Clancy, who we both know super, super well. I met him years ago while he was still teaching, just such a strong personality, such a, loving individual that just wants to help. And I had to learn and almost decipher how does the ACF and the Canadian Association and the German, how does this all fit under this umbrella of world chefs, right? And so for me, it was more important that Escoffier, and before that, Le Cordon Bleu, was recognized by world chefs. That was more important to me than any individual sort of achievements or milestones or accolades. But I would be lying if I didn't say that I absolutely adore my world chef certificate, which is being framed right now as we speak. But yeah, so to try to answer your question a little bit more directly, these organizations in Feeney and other organizations, Bread Guild, Baker's Guild, there's any place where there is a forum for an exchange of ideas, networking, communicating, friendship, relationships, that sort of thing. That's what's important to me. It's harder today to get the younger people to engage in these types of groups because they are so distracted by swiping, right? Yeah, but for as long as I can, I will continue to promote. I still grade certification applications that come in, mostly so that I can provide feedback and an email that someone can reach out to me if they need some help, as so many help me, right?
Yeah. That's a very important point. I mean, because you mentioned Auguste Escoffier. Of course, you're from the Escoffier School of Culinary Arts, and so we proudly repeat that Auguste Escoffier was the founding member of World Chef of our association. You are our education partner, and so with your quality culinary education label, and so that really sort of that name comes up again and again, and the name of your school is Auguste Escoffier. What really is that the legacy you want to transmit by through Escoffier, your school through Escoffier? What is who is Escoffier to you?
Yeah, and it's a great, important question, right? I think and again, we're very fortunate because we have this beautiful relationship with Michelle Escoffier, which makes it all real. It makes it, when you go to the museum and you're able to, walk in the same, hallways that Auguste walked when he was young, writing recipes, all of that. I think, there's a few things there, right? We hold ourselves to certain core values that are really, really important, and were important to Escoffier over 100 years ago. He acknowledged diversity, working conditions. He was a humanitarian. He treated people well. I don't know. It's rare that you find a photo of Auguste without, his brigade behind him and the people that he supported. He was a elegant, beautiful person, right? Who wanted to give back, who and also was respectful of this industry. Let's put this brigade system together. Let's take what we learned from Carême and make it even better. Let's codify these recipes so generations after us always remember, never forget, that sort of thing. We had a graduation a few weeks ago here. Thousands of people. The online graduates come, the on-ground graduates come. We always, if Michel is not in person, he's coming in through video. Escoffier is part of, I mentioned DNA earlier. He's part of our DNA of what we do every single day. It's really, really important. Good food is the foundation of genuine happiness, right? That's what it's all about. And when you think about what he achieved over 100 years ago, and you apply it to where we've come in the last decade of becoming the first institution to offer fully online accredited programs in this craft, affordable, and then to be, and again, in his respect, right, adding programs that provide options for others that go beyond culinary arts, plant-based cooking, holistic wellness and nutrition, entrepreneurship. Really, really, really important. I think Auguste Escoffier was dedicated to this craft like no other person before him, or perhaps even after him. We could talk about Bocuse, Thomas Keller. There are some amazing, there are some amazing personalities that we've had the great pleasure of learning from. And in my mind, in our mind, I would say, I think Auguste Escoffier opened the door for that. And there's so much respect when you mention that name, right? It just brings with it, sort of a different level, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, it sort of, he was a great humanitarian, and thought about the people first. And I sort of I sometimes wonder, in our industry, it can sometimes be a tough industry, and it's quite macho. It can be quite military, and I mean, sometimes ask if even from school level, are we doing enough to prepare young people, future chefs? Are we preparing them psychologically and mentally? And are we addressing mental health and stress management and leadership in general?
Maybe more than ever before, Jeff. Maybe more than ever before. Mental health is real, right? We and I don't think it's just us. I think any organization, whether you're working at Culinary Institute of America or Johnson & Wales, we provide the resources to young people that come to learn with us to help them cope with and get over some of the challenges. You look at, we talked about generations earlier, right? Certain generations, perhaps my generation, baby boomers, right? And I'm only speaking for myself, but I think a lot of baby boomers grew up with their parents both working, right? So we're somewhat independent, right? We sort of had to figure out how to get ourselves to school and make our lunches and go to baseball practice after school, that kind of stuff, right? And so with that, those skill sets sort of follow us into the industry. I always say that we have to we have to meet our students where they are. It's no longer black and white. It's no longer, this way or that. We have to be understanding. We have to be sensitive. We have to appreciate, where people come to us from. And we have to understand too, hence, here on ground, we have several different schedules, if you will. So you can go to school very early in the morning. You can go to school midday. You can go in the afternoon. You could go to school in the evening. For online, it's asynchronous. So you can go to school when it makes sense for you, right? I think it's one of the greatest things that we could do is to not, stick our students into a box and say, this is the way it has to be. Otherwise, you won't be successful. It's just the wrong way to connect with young people today, right? When you preside over a graduation and you see hundreds of graduates come and they bring their family, right? And they stand on that stage and they celebrate. I feel optimistic that our industry is going to be welcoming these enthusiastic people with open arms. Is it perfect every day? Of course not. It's not perfect anywhere every single day. But I'm about as optimistic as I can possibly be about this industry. And the podcast that you mentioned earlier too, just like having chats with you and doctors and nutritionalists and chefs. They all speak really endearing and warm and thoughtful and respectful about their employees and about the people that they work with. So again, I think we're at a place where our industry is probably more attractive and welcoming than ever before. Right. It's the wages have gone up, benefits have gone up, the work-life balance opportunity is there as well. And there's different ways. I never thought in a million years that I would become friends with so many influencers on social media, people who just love to cook. Right. And they don't claim to be a chef, but they just love food, and food is community, and community is love and giving back. It's absolutely, it's my vice. It's fascinating to me.
Yeah. No, because we do hear a lot about, there is a lack of skilled workers and people leaving industry, but you really feel that it's turning around, and you're a positive person. I can hear that. So we are moving into the right direction now. That industry is becoming more attractive and becoming more comprehensive and becoming more humane and mindful.
Yeah, and attractive, right? But I'm an advocate for young people to follow their passion and follow their dreams. So whether you want to be a doctor or a truck driver, or you want to be a great cook or a pastry chef or work with chocolate, whatever it is, follow your dreams. And again, I'm trying not to be naive. I'm a perfect example of someone who tried not to follow my dreams and got sidetracked for a minute and realized that my dream was in front of me all the time. There's something. Years and years and years ago, I remember I mentioned earlier Food and Wine magazine, where I first learned about Charlie Trotter and this restaurant that he was opening. And I was so enamored by the fact that he had no refrigeration in the restaurant because everything was fresh. Everything was coming in the back door as they were serving it. Everything was stainless steel. Even the cabinetry was stainless steel. And I couldn't believe it. I couldn't. Now, some musicians or motorcycle enthusiasts, everybody has their shiny object, right? So for me, it was the kitchen, and still is today. There's something about a beautiful stove that can bring me to tears, right? So years ago, probably around the same time, there was an issue of Food and Wine magazine that featured Southwest cuisine. So Mark Miller and some Dean Fearing, some of these early pioneers in Southwest cuisine. What is this cooking with chilies and tortillas and corn? And the cover of that particular issue had I think it was a porterhouse steak on kind of a rustic plate, and it had a bunch of herbs, basil, sage, thyme, oregano, and it was all wrapped up in twine and thrown on there. I couldn't get that vision out of my head for 20 years.
Right.
I keep calling it an episode, but that single issue cover of that magazine was enough to keep me. And I already had a degree. I had already gone to school for business, and I was so in love with this industry and couldn't believe that I could feel that way about a craft, right? And when I'll tell a story, my dad he'll give me a hard time for this. I remember the day that I first received my first level of certification with the ACF. My dad and I were running our own restaurant together at the time, named Joseph's after him. And so I get the letter in the mail that I had passed the certification. And back then you had to do all of these proficiencies in front of 2 certified chefs, right? So I did that in Portland. And I came home, I showed him the certificate, and he said, "Oh, that's very nice, very nice." And that's all he said, right? And maybe 4 or 5 hours, maybe 2 days later, I don't remember, he pulled me aside and he said, "I'm very proud of you, but you have so much to learn." I mean, I was 28 years old there, but he was right. And I'm 61 today, and I'm still learning. I'm still learning every single day.
Great, Kirk. Yeah, that's inspiration. So for the young people listening, is follow your passion and get involved. I know you're involved in many different organizations, and this is where you get your mentor, your leadership, your mentor, your inspirations from.
Yeah, absolutely. Across the board, I had a conversation on the podcast with a gentleman by the name of Dr. Terrell Strayhorn, and he's essentially a mindful leader, right? So for me, it was a very inspirational chat, and we did segue into food a little bit, and he talked about growing up, and he brought up some memories of his grandmother's cooking, right? And it was beautiful. And then what I didn't know is that he was an incredible singer, and then just breaks out into this beautiful song that he remembers his grandmother singing while she was making these amazing meals when he was growing up. So I take inspiration from Dr. Strayhill, who I may never, Dr. Strayhorn, who I may never have met in my entire life if it wasn't for this sort of connection, asking him to be on the podcast because he had a good message. He had a strong message. He's not a cook, not at all, but he has an appreciation for food and a love for those who cook the food, right? So again, I may be way over the top, way too optimistic, but I believe in people, and I believe that people are good.
Yeah. Oh, thank you, Kirk. That's refreshing and inspiring, and it's good to have optimism in today's world.
Right? Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. And we think, look at the bright side. So I really want to thank you for coming on the show and sharing that and all your passion. So I really appreciate that, Kirk.
Absolutely, and I hope that we have the opportunity either in France, or if you're over here in the States, that we can connect at either an event or maybe a World Chefs event of some sort, but we'll keep this relationship going. I appreciate it very much.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. And I hope to see you at the World Chef Congress in Singapore. And
that's at the top of my list. I talked to Michelle about that on Saturday, actually. So
yeah.
And thank you again. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Kirk. We're talking to Kirk Bachman, and thank you for listening. I'm still your host, Ragnar, and you're listening to World Chef Podcast. This is World on a Plate, and thank you for tuning in. Don't forget to subscribe, and stay safe, everyone. Take care. Bye-bye.